Hey, I'm Kate, and this is Barbell Therapy, the podcast, where we're giving power to vulnerability. We are going to help you lose weight and reach your goals, but we're going to show you that you're not alone in how you feel while you're doing that. Let's get vulnerable. I am so excited for you guys to listen to this episode. Shannon is awesome, and she has so much knowledge to share with us. I mean, things from talking about how sodium is actually not that bad for you, talking about how we need to be more grateful in life for the things that we have and letting that be our driver for motivation. She gives us her top 3 things that she thinks that you need to implement in order to have a healthier lifestyle. And she tells us a story about how she went from being a bodybuilding competitor to drinking a bottle of wine and eating a whole box of Oreos on the floor to where she is today in her fitness journey. So I'm super excited to get into it and can't wait to hear what you think. What is up, Barbell Therapy fans? And welcome back to this week's episode where I am interviewing Shannon. And I am super excited because we have a lot to go through. We had some technical difficulties this morning. We're making it through and we are just pushing along here. So Shannon, how are you?
I'm doing good. The technical difficulties might be spewing into talking difficulties now, right?
That's how it goes, right? It's like one thing after another, but that's okay. Oh man. All right. So Shannon, you started your fitness journey and everything that you're doing right now at 20 years old when you were a personal trainer, but you tried to kind of go a different route and fitness kept being shoved back into your face. So like, tell us all about that. Tell us about that beginning.
Yeah, basically. So I say, like, technically I started as a personal trainer when I was 20 years old, but I was an athlete my whole life and I coached volleyball. I've always been in the fitness industry, like in some realm, but it was when I was 20 that I actually started as a personal trainer at Bally Total Fitness, rest in peace. And I just did it like while I was in school. Like I was just 20 years old. Like I had no idea what I was doing in life or anything. And so I like would go back to school. I quit the gym. I worked other jobs and I would like just coach friends on the side. And like basically just every time I tried to do something else, like the universe just like shoved fitness back in my face some way where it was just like, here's your sign. Like this is what you need to be doing. And so it was finally, what was it? It was in 2018 when I finally like really listened and was like, okay, I'm going to start my own coaching business. And I actually started coaching online in 2018. And like, I guess that's in a nutshell of how it all, the online started. But yeah.
That's amazing. I feel like in 2018, I'm trying to even just like remember what an online presence was back then versus what it is now. So, I mean, I can't imagine that was easy for you, but like, why did you feel like online was the way to go? Like, tell us about how you were helping women then and, everything you were doing then.
Yeah. So it's funny that you say it seems like it wasn't easy because in my mind, I think it's actually harder to coach online now
Okay.
because it's so much more saturated. Like after COVID, every personal trainer in the world went to coaching online. So for me in 2018, it was almost easy because it was like this new novel thing that like nobody had ever heard of. And they're like, oh my God, you can coach me online and it can work with my schedule and blah, blah, blah. And it was a lot easier to get clients back then. But I did online partially because I wanted to be able to work my own schedule and work remotely and all that stuff. And I knew that I could do it without having to be there in person because you can do videos and everything, the way what we're doing right now, just videos. Right. So I was like, I know I don't need to be there in person. So that's why I decided to do it online. Like I had done the in-person thing for so long already. But yeah, it was actually weirdly easier back then.
I feel like that makes sense. But just the idea of like marketing when, before it was like cool.
Yeah.
And things like that.
Yeah, but that's why it was easier because it's like there was less of it. So when people came across it, they weren't comparing me to all the other coaches out there or like in conversation with people in real life. They had never heard of it. So they were like so intrigued by it.
I also feel like right now everybody has so many freebies and there is like such a saturated market that many people just like start by downloading all of the free things. Like and they don't like move forward with the coaching until like those things aren't working necessarily. And, you probably didn't necessarily experience that then either.
Yeah, no, not really. Like there was still like YouTube and stuff. People still got a lot of information from that, but
right.
Yeah. It's definitely a different game back then for sure.
One other thing that you said about the in-person versus the online, I know that I did a little bit of in-person personal training, but I just felt like I could do more. Like I had my clients coming in and they were just like talking to me about their food or their choices and I was like I want to help you with that, but like we have 1 hour and like I'm not going to take an hour from training to sit there and talk to you about nutrition. So I was like really struggling with that because I was like, you're coming in and I don't feel like we're changing a whole lot because nutrition plays such a vital role in your transformation journey.
Yeah, no, it totally does. And that's a really good point. Like, you get to help people like more in depth. And I always tell people that I'm like, even though I'm not like there with you in person, I still consider myself a personal trainer. Like I'm still, if anything, I'm like more involved in their lives, even though I see them maybe less frequently. But it's one of the things too is depending on where you work, what gym you work at and stuff, you honestly sometimes are also limited in what you can coach them on. So like I've worked in places where I'm not allowed to talk to them about their nutrition. And I'm sitting there in my mind and I'm just like, oh my God, I want to say so much stuff to help you. And I like legally couldn't. So
Right.
that's also a huge part of it. That's a really good point.
Yeah. And that scope of it, like, whether you can or you can't say something. And then on top of that, I actually read this, like, I was on Reddit for some reason, and this person was like complaining how they were trying to text their personal trainer on the weekends or like after hours, and their personal trainer wasn't responding. And they were like, why aren't they responding to me? And I'm like, well, they like,
Yeah,
I'm
that's
so
not my
confused. So,
job.
and this person was like, I really want that accountability and I want, somebody to celebrate their wins with me. And like, I was like, you're right. Like, as a personal trainer, I had a hard time turning the off button because I know you're not paying me for that hour, but like, I wanted to celebrate those things with you and you couldn't. And now, as in the online space, you can, and you so much better.
Yeah, absolutely. Because it's like, as a personal trainer, you still care about your clients and you want them to do well, but also you have to set those boundaries of being like, I'm not going to talk to you all weekend when you're only paying me for this like 1 hour.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Let's take it a little bit further back. You had mentioned that you were part of the Clean Plate Club. So talk to us about like what that is, what you thought healthy eating was before, and like where you are with that now.
Yeah. Okay. So this is one of those things. I have to say so much that I know my parents were coming from a good place and I have no like resentment towards them. Like they were doing the best they could to be a parent, but I was raised to be a member of the Clean Plate Club. And basically I wasn't allowed to leave the dinner table until I ate everything on my plate. And it was to eliminate food waste. My parents, they worked their asses off to pay for that food, to make that dinner. And then I was this bratty little kid that like didn't want to eat my broccoli, So like,
Right.
I get it. They wanted me to eat my food. But now looking back as an adult, it really skewed and messed up my relationship with food because I like to this day still struggle and have to be mindful with like understanding that it's okay to leave food on my plate if I am full. You know what I mean? So it's definitely something that I've had to work on a lot. And I think first just recognizing that that was a problem was like a big part of it. It's something like I've worked on it a lot and I'm continuing to work on it. And it's one of those things that's like, it's probably going to be a work in progress, like potentially for the rest of my life. I don't know. Hopefully not. But I said I was an athlete all growing up, like my whole life. Like, name a sport, I probably at least tried it. Like, I was very active. But that's another thing I love my parents for. They were very like, they wanted me to try everything and do everything. And I was always inclined to try sports. So I did lots of sports. So I was always very active, very athletic, but I did not know anything about nutrition. Like, I was pretty much knew that like vegetables were good and fast food was bad. But that alone right there kind of perpetuated those disordered thoughts about food, labeling them as good and bad.
Right.
And so it's like nowadays I view food, and I also coach my clients on changing how they view food as basically there are foods that are more nutritionally dense and foods that are more calorically dense. And they both can serve a purpose and be beneficial to you in different scenarios, and realizing how to, use maybe not fast food. Like that could be, somebody who's like struggling to get enough calories. Like maybe that is the route that they need to go. I mean, there's probably still some better options than that, but you know what I'm saying. And then like fruits and vegetables and things like that. If I'm eating just fruits and vegetables all day and I'm not getting enough protein or not enough calories, like that's not going to help me out either. So it's all about like teaching people how to eat what they need to eat, when and why, and just really educating people. And that's all stuff that I had to learn myself as well.
I mean, it's so crazy because like you said, I remember I had to battle my grandparents to be like, "I'm not eating this, I'm full." And, that's just how it is, but I totally agree and, can resonate that, like, they worked so hard to put food on the table.
Yeah.
And like you said, when we're labeling foods good and bad, I feel like that leads to so much confusion
Mhm.
because I have a client who's overseas right now, for work and things like that, and she was like, "Cheese is the devil, but that's all they eat here." I'm like, "Cheese is not the devil." I'm like,
Yeah.
"It's actually a whole source of protein. It's just calorically dense." Like, that's it. Like,
And that's the word. It's calorically dense. It's not bad. It's calorically dense. So it's like
right.
those calorically dense foods can actually be very good for somebody who has a smaller appetite or needs to gain weight. Like,
Yeah, absolutely. Regardless of what the situation is, especially in Europe, like food is different. Like nothing is bad. It's just a matter of how are we balancing it all to make sure that we're meeting everything that we need.
yeah. And then, so along those same lines, talking about like things being good or bad, I also was raised to think that sodium was bad for you. And it
Okay.
was so like my whole family, they are low sodium everything. And it's, because that's what their doctors have told them to do. But so then it's like being the descendant of this family, I'm being fed a low sodium diet my whole life. And I finally realized, actually, just in recent years, like it was in my early 30s, that I realized, like, holy shit, I'm not getting enough sodium. Like I've been an
Mm,
athlete my entire life and I live in Florida now, but I'm born and raised in Arizona where you actually like even in Florida and Arizona, like you're sweating a lot. And then you're an athlete on top of that. Like you need sodium. It's an electrolyte that regulates your heart rhythm. And actually realizing, holy shit, once I started adding in more sodium to my diet, I actually started feeling better. My heart rate didn't all of a sudden spike. My blood pressure didn't all of a sudden spike. And I all of a sudden was like, I would no longer get dizzy anymore. And just my muscle cramps got less. And everyone always thinks that that's because of potassium, which it does play a role in that, but it's also your sodium to water ratio. And mine had apparently been off like my entire life.
right. And what's crazy is like I think that doctors really need to be adapting more. It's not that it's a less sodium, it's less processed sodium, less
Mhm.
packaged foods. Like that is the differentiator there. Like you can salt your food, you can have, cured meats like not, they're higher in sodium, but they're not necessarily like bad. It's the Doritos and the, cereal and the quick mix pancakes
Yeah.
and all the processed food that we're eating, that's the like sodium that's bad for you. So if we can just like change that language to be, oh, you need to eat less salt and change it to like, you need to eat less packaged and processed foods, I think we would see a drastic change.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's one of the things too. I tell people, like, I've had a lot of my clients that have come to me and they're frustrated with their progress for whatever reason. And they come to me and they're eating like primarily whole foods, like very nutritious diet. And then I look at their sodium and they're getting like 1,500 milligrams of sodium per day because they're eating all whole foods. And I'm like, your diet is very, very nutritious, but you need to add salt to this because your sodium is like dangerously low with how active you are. And again,
Right.
that's one of those things you have to consider, like geographic location, how active you are. Like there's, 1,500 milligrams for somebody like, I mean, that's actually pretty low, but like it's, I lost my train of thought, but
Yeah, no, 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 exactly. Like there's so many variables that come along with it. And that's like where the whole coaching aspect comes in. Because again, you see all of this blanket information on the internet and you don't know, like, I, as someone who lives in the Northeast, most of my life, like I don't, I sweat a lot. Like that's not something I ever considered necessarily living in Florida or Arizona, or that it's so critical to increase that. But it's not a blanket statement like, oh, you shouldn't, like, I don't eat more than 3,000 milligrams of sodium, but like I eat up to that, right? Like
yeah.
on a daily basis. But I notice a significant difference when I'm on that lower end of that spectrum,
Mhm.
but it probably would be incredibly different if I was doing additional cardio, if I was some sort of an athlete, and I don't do a lot of cardio at all. So, all
And
those
it's,
individual
it's
life.
also so dependent on, like I said, not just how active you are, but your geographic location as well. But going back to what you were talking about with like the processed foods, that's it too. It's like when you're eating a very nutritious diet, like you can actually still be lacking in other areas. And that's where it's like you have to look at the whole picture. But again, those limiting those processed foods, it's still a good idea. And that is part of where sodium gets like that bad rap. And we always want to, we as society, like always want to try to demonize one thing. It's everybody always wants that quick solution. Oh, it's carbs. Oh, it's salt. Oh, it's sugar. Oh, it's this. But I always teach people that it's really a lot of the problem when people think they're addicted to salt or addicted to sugar. It's the addiction to hyperpalatable foods, which are foods that are a combination that are high in salt, sugar, fat, are the three. And it's like, if you look at any food that naturally grows, they're never going to be high in all three of those. Right. And it's like a combination that we as humans have created to make foods taste really freaking good so that you want to buy more of them.
Right. Absolutely. And I mean, honestly, this is a subject we could keep going down the rabbit hole on. But it's so important. And like the problem is like you said, people are looking for those quick fixes. They're looking for that easy way out, that easy solution. And at the end of the day, there isn't one. Like, because we have to break down 30 plus years of thought process and habits. So there is no easy solution because there's a lot of legwork that we have to do to get you to a balanced place. Because like at the end of the day, you know, just not eating anything that comes out of a package also isn't going to solve the problem, because that's that all or nothing mentality, which is also part of the problem, right? So many layers.
And it's the oversimplification of, you know, one person's going to tell you that it's salt that's bad. The next person's going to tell you that it's fat that's bad. The next person's going to tell you it's sugar that's bad. And it's like, all of those things are actually very vital to survive as a human being. Like, we need all of them. So you can't demonize any one of them. We just need to learn how to use them to our advantage and have everything in moderation.
Absolutely. And so I know that you're in the bodybuilding space. You've been bodybuilding, competing for 10 years. And going off of this relationship with food, you have mentioned that bodybuilding has actually improved your relationship with food. And I want to hear more about that, because I feel like we are on the other side of the coin 90% of the time, right? Like, I'm always hearing that bodybuilding ruined relationships with foods, and we're always demonizing bodybuilding. So tell us about that.
Oh man. Okay. So this is something I could go off on for so long. And I do want to say that everybody is different. So for me personally, it has very much helped my relationship with food. I will say, however, there have been highs and lows with it. I have made plenty of mistakes and I have had plenty of lows with it where my relationship with food maybe wasn't as good, but overall it has improved. I do think that a lot of the people that say bodybuilding ruined their relationship with food, I think they are trying, I don't want to like generalize, but oftentimes they're trying to place the blame on something and they're covering up a deeper underlying issue. Right. I think a lot of people get into the bodybuilding world because they're trying to like maybe put a Band-Aid over something. Maybe they already have, you know, disordered eating habits, and in which case bodybuilding can absolutely exacerbate those. Because bodybuilding is a sport where you have to take things to the extreme. And that includes your training, your cardio, and your nutrition. So if you already have a messed up relationship with any of those, with your body image, if you're somebody who overtrains, if somebody who already undereats, or whatever that looks like, it can absolutely make those problems worse. Now, for me personally, the reason it helped is because I have learned so much about my body, so much about nutrition, which has then helped me learn so much about my body. So for instance, sodium. It was during prep one year that I realized, shit, I need way more salt in my diet. I was getting horrible muscle cramps and I was taking potassium pills. I was doing all this stuff. And then it was when I found out that whole thing about pickle juice can help you get rid of muscle cramps that I was like, okay, this is actually working. And then I was like, wow, this pickle juice actually tastes really good. And I hated pickles at the time, which I like them now. But I was like, okay, this tastes really good. Like, and I realized, okay, like I really need the salt. And anyways, that was basically that in a nutshell of how I realized that I was really deficient in sodium. I also realized during competition prep that I have an adverse reaction to eggs. I'm not necessarily allergic to eggs. We'll call it like an intolerance. But there was 1 year in prep where I was having egg whites every day. And I started having like really like a lot of digestion issues. And I was like, what's going on? And it took me so long to figure it out because I had always been taught that eggs are like a pure source of protein. They're like the most perfect source of protein, which they are for some people, but my body did not react well to them. So took me honestly, probably, I mean, that entire prep, so like 6 months. And then all of a sudden I was like, oh my God. And I cut out the eggs and I felt so much better. The craziest part though, is not only my digestion improved, but months later, months after I cut them out, my sinuses improved.
Interesting.
So what's crazy, my entire life, I always thought I was like a mouth breather. Like I thought I just had bad sinuses and I was like, I'm a mouth breather. It is what it is, blah, blah, blah. Probably 6 months to a year after I stopped eating eggs, all of a sudden I could breathe through my nose. And I'm just like, what? So it's just like literally mind blowing. And like to this day, I'm like, I can breathe through my nose now. And then if I start having stuff with eggs in it, like I'll start to have more digestion issues, more sinus issues. But so just like the way that I've learned foods that my body likes more, it's also taught me moderation and how to eat to fuel my body in different ways. Like when I first started competing, I was all about macros. Like I need flexible dieting. Like I could never stick to a strict meal plan. And that was great for me at that time. But then what was really interesting was I think it was 2020. No, I remember. So it's just a couple years ago, I did one prep where I was like, let me do a meal plan. I just want to try it. Like as a coach, it'll make me a better coach. I want to try it. And it was like kind of a game changer where I realized the like value in being consistent with what you're eating, not just how much of what you're eating, like the macros of it, and realizing like, okay, if I'm actually eating like the same things every day with variety, you can't eat like literally the exact same things every day. You'll have nutrient deficiencies, but kind of like the value in like sticking to a structure and getting rid of that decision fatigue of what am I going to make for dinner. So now I kind of live my life, even during my improvement seasons, where I still follow like kind of just a basic structure of how I eat throughout the day. And then I'll add in some variety here and here. But it, like I said, it just eliminates that decision fatigue. Because there would be times where I would get obsessive with my macros, where it was like, I always told myself, oh, it's like a fun game. I'm playing Tetris and seeing what I can fit and da 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 da. But it got obsessive. Like it got weird and I like had to hit my triple zeros. And so that's where the meal plan was great. Cause I'm like, okay, like I just, every day I have some sort of protein source along with with oatmeal. And then I put some sort of fruit in it. And it's like, I mix that up a lot. Like some days I have chicken, some days I have turkey cause I can't have eggs. And then I'll do my oatmeal and some days I'll put banana in it. Some days blueberries, some days apple. So it's like, I'm still getting variety, but I have this same, like, this is what I'm going to eat. And I don't have to think about it.
Yeah. And I think that that's really valuable for a lot of people. I have some clients that like absolutely cannot wrap their head around eating even similar meals every day. So we do have to like work and strategize on that. And then I have some clients that are like, nope, I need to meal prep 5 days for the week because I cannot think about more than one meal at a time or whatever it is. There's so much we could dive into on that. But like also what you said about macros, like, and flexible dieting and macros is not the same thing as like if it fits your macros. Like just because you zero out your day or whatever it is, doesn't mean that you're eating a nutritious diet. I could get to my macros on Uncrustables and protein shakes and that's not good, right? Like
and I think that's where the meal plan came into play a lot too, because that's when I realized a lot of like how macros are going to be more accurate than just tracking calories. But even macros, like once you start taking into consideration things like fiber and all that stuff, like it still makes a difference. So it's like if I get, 200 grams of carbs from, oatmeal versus 200 grams of carbs from Skittles, my body is going to process that completely differently, even though if I log my macros, they look exactly the same. Right. So that's where I kind of realized that like that power of consistency with what you're eating, but again, still leaving room for variance so that you're not, like having options. So it's not always chicken, it can be chicken or turkey or fish and things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And like whenever, like for my clients, so I kind of do somewhere all in the middle of it where I build them a meal plan, like a 3-day meal plan that has all different things on it. And I just always tell them like this is a visual representation of like what your plate and what your meals can look like. Like in terms of sauces, I want you to look at the fiber. When I give you a meal, don't just replace all of those carbs with like pasta. You see that there's like 4 ounces of carrots here. Like we need to make sure we're still hitting like that fiber and like those nutrients and things like that. So like I love like meal plans as a visual representation. I love macros as an idea of like how to kind of structure your day, but then those micronutrients, the sodium, the potassium, the fiber are all play a really critical role as well. But that's all so hard. Like for someone who's not in the space the same way we are, doesn't love researching this stuff,
Yeah. And
it's
that's
so hard.
That's why what we do can be so beneficial because it like takes that thought process out of it for them. And I also like I coach meal plans and macros, and I also coach people just like trying to develop better habits and everything in between. And everybody's different. And I think it's also important to understand and recognize in ourselves that like what worked for us in the past might not work for us now, and being flexible and open to adjusting those. Like I said, I started with macros and then I went to meal plans and now I'm back to macros, but I'm implementing what I learned from the meal plans. So it's like you can go from one to another depending on where you're at in your own journey too.
Yeah, so many things that we can continue to go on from here. But I kind of want to go to that you told me a story about a prep in 2018 where you kind of hit rock bottom. So I want you to tell us a little bit about that night as much as you felt comfortable with.
Yeah.
What was going through your head and like how did you get out of that?
Oh, God. Okay. So yeah, so I'm pretty open about this. I have to obviously it was a long time ago, so it takes me like a bit to think back to it. But it was in 2018. That was when I had started coaching online and I was in prep. I did I think 3 or 4 shows that summer. And since I had started coaching online, I had also left the restaurant industry. So it was like a very transitional time in my life. Like I was getting out of, I had worked in the restaurant industry for 8 years. That was very much like what I had been doing, but I was now motivated, like, okay, I'm going to start coaching online full time. And that was a big shift, even though it was obviously the right decision. And I was super, super passionate about it. Like anytime you have a really big change in your life like that, like there's a lot that goes on internally. And then I was kind of, I guess, like masking a lot of my emotions with being in prep and competing. And what's funny is I pushed really hard that year. So yeah, I did 4 shows that year. And the first one that I did not come in lean enough. And I was so embarrassed because I was like, oh my God. So then I pushed really, really hard. And I ended up my last show of the season. It was the first show that I ever won first place. So I was like so excited. Like everything was great. All that pushing was worth it. But that pushing so hard also screwed up my leptin and ghrelin, my hunger hormones. And so all of a sudden I was out of prep. I didn't have a show I was working towards. I didn't have my normal job that I had been going to. I was in this big transitional phase in my life and my hunger hormones were out of whack. And so I was just like kind of just a mess, basically, to put it simply. And fast forward to, I remember it was one Friday night where I was just like, I was so depressed because I was gaining weight quicker than I meant to. And even though I had a reverse diet in place, that change from going to the restaurant industry to working a desk job,
Right.
I knew my activity level was going to be less, but I didn't realize like how drastic that change was going to be. If you ever know somebody that's worked in the restaurant for a long time and they quit, it's very, very, very common to gain weight, no matter who you are, because I'm a coach and it happened to me. You know what I mean? So, and I was accounting for that, but I still gained weight faster than I wanted to. And my hunger hormones were screwed up and everything. So I remember it was a Friday night. I had finished work and my husband was still at work. And I was just so upset with like how I was looking, how I didn't have a goal that I was working towards now that there wasn't a show in sight. And I had finished eating dinner and I was still hungry because my hormones were just all out of whack. And I was just so depressed. And I remember drinking an entire bottle of wine to myself and eating an entire box of Oreos and just on the couch, just like literally like it's such a hot mess, like not like an actual bottle of wine in my hand, you know what I mean? But like the bottle of wine, the empty box of Oreos on the couch, just like sobbing. I was probably watching some ridiculous show on TV. I don't know. That was that moment when I was just like, what am I doing? What is going on? And that was when I realized, okay, like there's something wrong. I'm not just upset, but I'm also like internally something's wrong. Like the fact that I ate an entire box of Oreos after dinner and wasn't full. Like that's when I was like, something's up. And that's when I learned a lot about like how prep affects our hormones. And it's not just our sex hormones, like our estrogen, testosterone, all that stuff, but also hunger hormones as well, our cortisol, our melatonin. Like prep can affect things a lot of ways. And that's where I said my bodybuilding career, like there's been a lot of highs and lows. And overall, I'm very grateful for it and I love it. And I do plan to compete again, but I have hit some very low points. But one of the things I always tell my clients is those hard days are the character building days. And I wouldn't be where I am now, and I wouldn't know what I know now if I hadn't gone through that.
Right.
And one of the things that I love now is like, as a coach, I can coach my clients so that they don't have to go through that. Like, I made the mistake for you so that you don't have to do it.
Right. It's like, yes, they're character building days. Yes, you're going to have low days, but that doesn't mean you have to get as low as where I was or where I've seen. Like, I want to make sure we don't get to that point.
Yeah.
Or if you've been there, I want to make sure we don't go there again, right? Like, that's what I'm here to help you do. And I think that that's really, really important to remind people because, you know, when they look at you now, they're like, oh, she's so successful. She's a coach. She would have never gained weight. She would never drink a bottle of wine, whatever. And like your clients look at you now, and to hear those stories and to know that you have not only been there, but you're going to prevent them from getting there is so, so, so important. So yeah, I love that. I'm curious then, you know, we've talked a little bit about hormones and things like that. Do you feel like bodybuilding has played a factor into like kind of changing your hormones and things? And how are you kind of, you know, recovering from that? Is there a way to be in the bodybuilding space without that happening?
Yes. Okay. Absolutely. So it's definitely affected my hormones in the past. I've openly talked about this on social media, and I had a podcast in the past, and it's still up there if you want to listen to any of the episodes. And I have ones that are about like a lot of these topics. And one of them being that I have lost my period before during prep, and that's not uncommon for competitors. And it's one of those things that you kind of have to weigh out the risk versus reward when it comes to competing, because competing is a sport that takes things to the extreme. And as much as I love it, I'm not about to sit here and say that it's like the healthiest thing in the world. But in its defense as a sport, one of the things that always upset me when I started competing, so many people would be like, I'm so concerned about you, like you're going to hurt your hormones, da, da, da. And I always responded by saying, where was this concern when I was playing soccer getting multiple concussions?
Right.
Like every sport comes with risks. That's how it is. Now, bodybuilding, yes, it can screw up your hormones. Yes, you can lose your period. Yes, it can screw up your hunger hormones. That is very true. But all of those things you can recover from, like for the most part. Like obviously, if you take it to the extremes of like doing tons and tons of steroids and causing heart problems, that's a different story than what I'm talking about. But like for the most part, it's repairable, and with proper guidance, it can be kept to a minimum as well. Because I have coached girls to the stage who have not lost their periods, who have not screwed up their hunger hormones, and there are ways to do it in a healthier way. The thing that people don't like to hear though is that in order to do that, it takes a hell of a lot longer. And not just the prep to the stage, but the buildup before you even start a competition prep. So my clients that have done well and haven't lost their periods, I worked with them for like a year before we even started a prep, because I was like, I need to get you in the healthiest place possible so that we can do something like this with as little repercussions as possible.
Right.
So it is possible to do it without the like negative health sides, but it requires a lot more patience.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, it's that quick fix mentality. It's the same thing, whether it's general population just looking to lose weight, whether it's bodybuilding, there's so many options for that quick fix or for that easier, less resistance path. And we just got to keep reminding people that if you want the most sustainable approach, if you don't want health issues, if you want to make sure that you actually learn something from this process, the quick fix solution isn't that answer.
100%.
Right?
And that also kind of reminds me, like the quick fix, like not only are people that want to compete, they want to do it, you know, oh, I want to do a 12-week prep, which is a really short prep, and people don't realize that. But then I also get the girls who come to me and they're like, I want to look like a bikini competitor without actually competing. And I'm like, you have to understand that those girls on stage are killing themselves. They probably don't have a period. They're probably really hungry. They're probably really tired. Like, do you actually want to look like that? Because it comes at a cost. Like they train to look like that for one day. It's called peak week because they're trying to peak their physique for one day. And so also having to like manage those expectations of what people think, you know, they want that quick fix and they want to look like this, but also realizing that like, it comes at like I said, it comes at a cost. And like, do you want to do it in a healthy, sustainable way, or
Yeah.
Do you really want the quick fix that's going to not last?
Right. And I think one thing that you brought up that's really important too is that there is a population of people that would love to be incredibly lean, but they don't understand the difference between stage lean and, normal everyday life lean, right? And the dangers behind maintaining a stage lean type of presence. There's also a difference between bikini competitors, figure, and like all the different stages of that. And then in addition to all of that, there's plenty of people that want to be somewhere in that category of like leaner and muscular without ever competing. But the problem there is that when you anchor yourself into only wanting to do that just to look a certain way and you forget about all the health aspects and all you're doing is just killing yourself to achieve that, you're going to potentially end up sitting on the floor with a box of Oreos, right?
Yeah,
Like that's where you're
100%.
at. Right.
Yeah. And I ask people that. Like, I've actually had clients or potential clients that I've actually talked out of competing before. And I know that sounds crazy, but like, I'm a coach. Like, my clients are most important as a person first, and then as a competitor. Like, they are not just another person I'm going to put on stage for a transformation. Like, I actually give a shit about my clients. And I always ask them, I'm like, what is your why? Why do you want to compete? Because if you're doing it for some sort of validation, you're not doing it for the right reasons. Like, competing has changed my life so much for the better, but it's not just because, oh, I look hot in a bikini. It's because it's taught me discipline. It's taught me time management, and it's given me that confidence. But again, not the confidence of like, oh, I look good in a bikini. It's the confidence of like proving to myself that I can do really hard shit.
Yeah.
So it's like, that's what I love about this sport. And like, yes, sure, it is nice to like, have these pictures of like, damn, look what I did, look how good I looked. But I also look at those and I'm like, I was so excited to eat a burger.
In bodybuilding, you learned confidence, discipline, time management. Outside of competing, do you feel like, that's the only way to build those things? Like how does someone that doesn't want to compete in bodybuilding or doesn't want to be super lean, how do they build that confidence, that discipline?
It's honestly, it's the same concepts. You don't have to get on stage to prove to yourself that you can do hard stuff. You can set other goals. You can still you have to fall in love with the process, whether you're competing or doing it for a lifestyle. You have to fall in love with the process, because even competing, it's one day. And you can't go through months and years of hard work for one day. Like, you have to love the journey and the everyday part of it.
Yeah. And also the expense behind it.
Yeah.
No, and everybody's just like, I don't think people really realize that. I didn't realize that. I had a reconstructive shoulder surgery, and I was working with this coach, and this was years ago, 2019. And I was like, I am really small right now. So I have these broad shoulders. Everyone has always told me I'd be a great figure competitor. And she was like, well, you're really small. Like, we can't be figure anytime soon. She's like, let's try bikini first. And I was like, okay. And then I started having to start to budget for the suits and all and the heels. And I was like, wait a second. I was like, this is not worth it.
Yeah.
So,
and those are a lot of the little things that people don't even take into consideration. So one of the things that I do have is for anybody that's wanting to compete that has never done it before and maybe doesn't know how to start, I do have a resource that I send to people, and it's just a guide for first-time competitors. And it literally breaks down anything and everything you want to know about competing, including things like the costs. And it breaks down like everything you have to budget for and stuff. So if anybody listening is interested in that too, definitely hit me up, because I'll send you that. It's very straightforward, no bullshit. Like, I'm not the coach that's going to blow smoke up your ass and tell you you're ready to get on stage when you're not.
And that's literally so, so, so important, because I don't think it truly, you don't even understand the half of it. And it's for anyone who went to college, who, when you take those 100, 200 level classes that are the weed out courses. And I'm like, that's exactly what your resource sounds like.
Yeah.
Do you really want to do this?
Yeah, no, it literally is. It's very straight up. It almost kind of is trying to scare you away from it. Yeah. And at the end, it's okay, you still want to do this? Okay, cool. Here's the next steps.
Let's go on to the other side of what you've done. So you worked with people with a lot of disabilities, you've worked with seniors, and now you're in the bodybuilding space. Do you find yourself doing both still? Do you find that you have two parts of you?
It's actually funny that you put it that way, because I actually have always kind of felt that it's two different parts, but there definitely is like an area where they cross. Because so basically my background, a little bit of my background, I have coached Special Olympics. I used to work at a gym that was specifically for seniors and anybody on disability. So like if you name a disability or a chronic condition, I've probably worked with it. Like I've literally trained people who were on the wait list for a lung transplant, people who were missing limbs, multiple sclerosis, Parkinson's, like anything you can imagine I've trained. And then I actually now work part-time at a chiropractic and rehabilitation center where I train primarily auto accident patients. So a lot of whiplash, herniated discs, things like that. But we also see people that are coming in for other reasons as well. But that's something I'm also really, really passionate about, is helping people through injuries and illnesses and stuff, learning how to still either rehab their injury or like still improve their quality of life, even despite some sort of condition or disability. And I'm really passionate about that. So it is kind of like I still have two separate parts, but there's an overlap because bodybuilding and athletes of any type get injuries. Like it's almost inevitable that it's going to happen. So it has served me very, very well in coaching my athletes and knowing how to honestly just prevent that stuff from happening. Like I nerd out so much on anatomy and kinesiology, like learning those like movement patterns of like how I'm training these people that are rehabbing something. And now knowing, okay, this is how we're rehabbing it. So I'm going to have my clients do this shit before so that this just doesn't happen to them. So it definitely has like, it's beneficial for both, for sure.
For sure. I feel the same way in a different way. Like I'm a Division I strength and conditioning coach, like, and then I also train, women in their 30s and 40s who are just trying to like get back into shape, things like that. And I feel like there's just like, I have to like take one hat off for each silo of it because it's like, how I'm training my women's soccer team is like not how I'm going to train my clients that are just, trying to live a healthier lifestyle, right? But there is still overlap because like some of my clients who want to get into running, chances are when we go from 0 to 100, regardless of like what the amount is, we're going to maybe hit some shin splints or some like, hip issues with running. So me working with athletes, I'm like, I know exactly what to do to implement to make sure that that doesn't happen, right?
Yeah.
So
100%. Yeah. And so for me, it's like the injuries have helped me with the athletes, but then also I have to like understand that when I'm coaching or training these people that are going through injuries, like I'm not training them as an athlete and I have to like tone it down a notch. So it's like, yeah, you have to take off one hat for the other, but yeah.
Yeah. I also feel like you learn so much in both that you can bring to the other. Like I learned so much about like being, an adult outside of myself, like all these different perspectives and viewpoints and things that like you can do in life from my clients that then like when my athletes are talking to me about certain things, I feel like I have all these like worldly perspectives that I can, help coach them, through the rest of their lives. And then working with athletes, like I can bring that to my clients and remind them that these skinny soccer players have this body dysmorphia. So like everyone is feeling it, right? Like
100%.
we all feel it.
Yeah. God, talking about body dysmorphia. Yeah. People always want to look like the competitors and stuff. And I'm like, again, not only like, okay, is that girl probably really hungry and tired, but like, she's probably still unhappy with how she looks. And again, that's everybody's different, but a lot of the competitors, like I said, a lot of people are doing bodybuilding to like cover up something else deeper going on. And a lot of times, yeah, they're still not happy with how they look. And it's sad, but it's very true.
That, and like, there's that instilled competitor in you where regardless, even if you win first place, next time you go on stage, you're not just going to bring the same thing. You're going to make improvements, right? So like you're always chasing more on that front. So I feel like whether you're covering it up or not, like we're forgetting that there's a human behind that photo and that human has a lot going on internally, emotionally, whatever, like what's going on and how they feel.
Yeah. So one of the things that I always say is like very bittersweet about any fitness journey is that there's no end to it. Cause it's like, as soon as you hit one goal, it's like, okay, well, what's next? And it's bittersweet because it's like, it can cause that like just constant, like you feel like you're never there, but then at the same time, it pushes you to always be better. Yeah. So it's like, again, you have to love that journey. You have to love that process of it.
Yeah. And that's, like you said earlier, like that's what falling in love with the process does, because then you're not, you're constantly chasing a better version of yourself, but that doesn't have to necessarily mean you ever stop, right? Like just because you hit your goal weight, just because you hit, you're starting to see abs, like you never stop. And it's not to say that like you're never satisfied. You're just always hungry to continue to be better inside and out. And you'll continue to just like build a better version of yourself, whether it's mentally, physically, whatever. And that is the beautiful part of like that fitness journey, is that it just never ends and you're always in pursuit of just like a higher version of yourself. And I love that.
Yeah, absolutely.
You told a story about how you work with a 97-year-old who lifts legs 3 times a week. So tell us a little bit more about him. And then I want to hear where some differences you're seeing between seniors that train, that don't, and things like that. Tell us all about that.
Okay. So I honestly, this guy, he was 97 back when I worked there. And obviously I can't say his name because it was like
Right,
HIPAA
absolutely.
and whatnot. But this guy was such a badass. He was 97 years old. He walked everywhere. He would come to the gym, he would walk with his walker, and he would train like on the leg press 3 times a week. And that gym that I worked at, that was for seniors, was one of the coolest experiences I've ever had in my life, because I literally watched people in their 80s and 90s gain strength and improve their physical health. So when people tell me like I'm too old or it's too late, I'm just calling bullshit so quickly. Like the amount of things I've seen and people I've trained, like not only am I just so much more grateful for my own health and abilities because of it, but I've also like, it's just so inspiring. And talking about the things that I've seen with the older people. So one of the most interesting things that I kind of just noticed, like anecdotal evidence from working there, the people who lived into their 80s and 90s, there was 2 correlations that I saw between them and the ones that were passing away in like their 60s and 70s. Number one is that they weren't sedentary. It doesn't mean to say that they were like some amazing athlete, but like this guy, he would just walk everywhere. Like he would walk to the grocery store, he would walk to the gym. Like they just moved their bodies. They weren't the people that were just sitting there. The second thing I noticed was that they weren't smokers. Enough of them would drink. I talked to some of them that were like hilarious how much they drink. And I'm like, how are you 95 years old and still drinking like straight gin all the time? So we'll have that conversation later, but like none of them smoked. So those are the 2 big things. I'm like, just move your body and don't smoke. Like that was like the biggest things that I saw. But yeah, it was super cool seeing like the difference between like the difference it makes in how well you age. Like aside from just that, Jim, both of my grandfathers lived to be in their 90s, and one of my grandfathers was very active, very into fitness, very into like taking care of his health, and my other grandfather wasn't. And seeing them at the same age and how different they aged. My grandfather, who was very active, he was still up and moving around until he passed away at, I think, 97 when he passed away. And like he had a walker and stuff, but he was still moving around. Whereas my other grandfather passed away at, I think, 92. And he was in a wheelchair, like hunched over, like so like decrepit and small. And just realizing like how much you're like what you do for your health right now is going to make such a difference for you later down the road.
Again, like just bringing that back to like, that means more than just losing the 20 pounds and, kicking it out the window, right? It means maintaining it and doing it for the rest of your life. And, I feel like this ties into another story you had told me about Hurricane Helen and how, you had to carry your cat and personal belongings. So like You're young, you're healthy, you're a fitness coach. So it feels obvious that that would be something that you could do. But like, since you've worked with seniors and people with disabilities, tell us how you can equate those 2 things together and how training will help you in the long run.
No, 100%. So that was one of those things. I shared that story because as it was happening, I didn't even think anything of it. I was in literal survival mode. So what happened was Hurricane Helene came, and my neighborhood is like, I'm, as the crow flies, a mile from the water, and our elevation of our front yard is only 6 feet above sea level. So after Hurricane Helene passed, the storm surge came in and it flooded my entire neighborhood very quickly. And it was absolutely terrifying. Like we were literally in survival mode. We were watching the water just coming up the stairs to our front house, like our front door. And we're like, what do we do? Like, we need to get out. Like, do we stay in our house? Do we get out? What do we do? And we, thankfully, our neighbors that are just 2 houses down, their house is elevated more and they have a second story. So we made the decision in the moment to grab our pets and go to their house. That, again, I didn't think anything of it in the moment, but I'm carrying my cat in my litter box. My husband was carrying the dog, and we like literally took our animals out of the house and walked through water that was waist deep to get to our friend's house to get to higher ground for safety. But this wasn't just like walking through water. Like this was a storm surge that was coming in. Like there was a current pushing on us, and I was carrying my cat, and like it was just, I think just the adrenaline of it, I like didn't even question it because I was just like, I need to get to safety. But then looking back on it, I'm like, I can't believe I did that. And I'm so grateful that I had the physical ability to do that, because if I wasn't in better shape, that water could have just washed me away. You know what I mean? Or like, so it's things like that, that it's like, I might not even be super old yet where I'm like, oh, I'm so glad I worked out, blah, blah, blah. But like, I just have the ability to do that now. And it's just like moments like that. I don't even know if I can even like put it into words, but just realizing like how grateful I am for my health. And like part of the reason I eat and train the way I do is out of love and respect for my body. It's
Right.
not just, okay, yeah, I'm a competitor and I'm doing it for this sport. It's because like I want to take care of my body and be able to get out in an emergency situation like that.
And I mean, like, with you working with seniors and people with disabilities, like, do you feel like you look back and you're like, I can pinpoint a couple of people in their 80s, 90s that probably could have done that same thing because of how well they've taken care of their health through these years?
Yeah, probably. I mean, there's definitely like when people age, you can tell like, I mean, maybe not everybody, but I see people and I look at them and I can tell like who has more strength and stamina than others. Like I can just, that's, you know, it's part of my job as a physique coach. I look at people and I see their body composition
Yeah.
and whatnot. But yeah, absolutely.
Is there anything else that you feel like is really important that you want to talk about? Anything we didn't cover yet?
I just being grateful for living in an able life. Like that's like one of the main takeaways I've had with my experience working with the people that I worked at is just being grateful to have two eyes to see with, two lungs to breathe with, two arms to hug with, two legs to walk on, and never taking that stuff for granted. I think that's like one of the most important things. And again, like I said, going to the gym and training and eating nutritiously out of love and respect for your body rather than out of like hate and punishment for it.
One thing that you just said, like being grateful for everything that you do have and reminding yourself that the people that don't have that genuinely wish that they would. So, like, I don't want to say the word squander, but people that don't have those same abilities feel like you're squandering your opportunities because, you know, people that are paralyzed and going to the gym in a wheelchair and they're looking at people on two legs that don't go to the gym at all. And they're just
Yeah.
like, oh gosh, what I would do if I had your legs or,
Absolutely. And
yeah.
that's one of the things I always tell people that I'm like, the next time you catch yourself being like, I don't want to do cardio, I'm like, imagine telling a quadriplegic that you don't want to do cardio. You know what I mean? Or imagine being the person that like takes up space in an elevator when there's somebody in a wheelchair waiting when you could have taken the stairs. You know what I mean? And just again, it's like just celebrating what your body can do
Yes.
for you and everything.
And it's not about like shame, like don't, you know, it's not about like making you feel shameful about these things, but it's more so just that reminder and that kick in the butt you need when motivation is low is that like try to have that positive perspective that like I can do this, so I'm going to. And that might help.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Kind of real quick also too, it kind of that same thought process can go with nutrition as well, because like when we think about like, oh, I don't want to eat chicken again, oh, I don't want to eat my broccoli again, like the fact that we live in a place where we can choose what we eat every day, that we have healthy food readily available to us, like there are plenty of people in the world who do not have that privilege. And so realizing that like, okay, maybe you are like, yeah, sure, you'd rather eat pizza, but like there's somebody else out there that would kill to have your chicken and broccoli again. And just again, it's just being grateful to have that choice.
What are some healthy habits and things like that that you were like, everyone should do this? Give me your top 3 that everyone needs to achieve.
Okay, move your body.
Okay.
Literally whatever that looks like for you. If you don't like lifting weights, then like go for a walk, take a Zumba class, take a yoga class, like whatever it looks like just move your body, drink your water.
Yep.
And then you said 3. Okay.
Yeah.
So the thing with water, one of my favorite analogies with that is like thinking about, if you think about your organs as like Like we need to keep them hydrated. And when you're not hydrated, your organs become like little shriveled raisins. And that's like that little visual was like one of the biggest, like, I don't know. I love that like analogy of that visual for me for explaining people like why you need water for more than just like anyways. And then a third one, I always like break it up like fitness, nutrition, and mindset. Be grateful, like I said, because I always break things up. I'm like training, nutrition, mindset. So, and I think that's the biggest thing is gratitude.
What is your biggest hot take in the fitness and nutrition industry right now?
You're not addicted to sugar. You're not addicted to salt. Like I think that maybe, I don't know if it's considered a hot take, but like you're not addicted to that. You're possibly addicted to dopamine if you think you're addicted to those things. I don't know if that's a hot take, but
I think so. I think it is. Yeah. Because there's so many people that are like, oh my gosh, you shouldn't have any sugar. Don't have sugar. I actually saw a coach recently posting about people not eating fruits because there's sugar. And so,
yeah, I've had clients come to me like afraid to eat carrots because of the sugar. And I'm just like, it breaks my heart. And thankfully I've been able to like work with them on like healing those food relationships and stuff. But yeah, it's people will say that, oh, I'm addicted to sugar. And their argument is like, well, when I stopped eating it, I stopped craving it. But I'm like, that's because you stopped getting that, like that hit of dopamine and you found there like the ways to get dopamine in other ways. And like, we're not actually addicted to sugar. Because if you were addicted to sugar, you would be drinking honey and maple syrup.
right.
Like you would be getting the purest form of sugar if you were addicted to it.
We could go on. But the biggest take here is that the majority of people are not addicted to sugar, and you just have to heal your relationship and your mindset around food and where that sugar and like what it means to you is coming from.
Yes, exactly. Which is not easy to do.
No.
I have to say that. Like it takes work.
Yes.
So.
Yeah. My final question for you, if you had to fuck, marry, or kill squat, bench, or deadlift, what would it be?
Okay, so I remembered this one and I was laughing so hard. And it's weird for me because my response to this question has like changed over the years because there's been so many, like if you had asked me a year ago, my answer could have been totally different. But so right now I'm obsessed with squats. I love them. I would totally marry them. I used to hate them, but right now squats for sure. And then I think I would fuck deadlifts and kill bench. And again, it's crazy because back in the day, bench was like my favorite. But just right now with where I'm at in my journey and where I'm at in my training, like, yeah, I would marry squats, fuck deadlifts, and kill bench.
I totally agree with you where like I would have said that things would change my perspective and whatnot. And so I'm currently dealing with like a neck injury. And it's so funny because the neck injury has literally means that squat maintains the worst lift of all time. Can't stand.
You gotta get on a belt squat, girl.
My hips do not like the belt squat. So we're working on some other things here, but it's just so funny because as a power lifter, that's literally 1/3 of my sport.
Yeah.
And I can't stand it. So I'm just like, I always tell my coach, I'm like, how do I just become so strong in the bench and deadlift that like my squat doesn't need to be that? I'm like, tell me how.
Yeah, okay. I used to hate squats, like used to legitimately hate them. And now it's like my jam. And that's where it's like I said, like our journeys are all different and you got to let it flow and things that used to work might not work now. And you got to roll with it.
And that's like part of, again, like loving the process is figuring that all out and being okay with all of those changes and dynamics.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So tell us like where we can find you, how we can like follow and support you and all the things.
Yeah, so I'm very fortunate that I don't think there's another Shannon Maves in existence. I have tried searching for one. So pretty much if you just search my name anywhere, either Shannon Maves or Shannon Maves Fitness, you'll find me. My Instagram is just Shannon Maves. My website is shannonmavesfitness.com. And those are like probably the best two areas. Like I said, I do have a podcast. I haven't done a new episode in months. It's called Treadmill Talks with Shannon Maves. If anyone wants to check that out. And then I've got a YouTube that's just basically just form videos. It's not really anything like super fancy, but just like form videos. I'm kind of on TikTok, not a ton, but like literally just any of the social media, just search Shannon Maves and it'll probably be me.
Perfect. In terms of working with clients, coaching, things like that, how can people work with you if they wanted to check you out?
Yeah, so like I'm very active on Instagram. So if you just shoot me a DM, I'm on there like basically every day, like maybe like twice a year. I'm not on there in my DMs. You can also go to my website if you want to fill out an application on there. But yeah, I love coaching first-time competitors. I love coaching lifestyle clients that are wanting to, basically, I put it as trying to find a sustainably fitness-focused lifestyle that you can actually enjoy and adhere to. So again, it's about like working a lot with mindset and improving food relationships, body image, mindset in the gym, things like that. That's what I'm really passionate about. And then also injury rehab. So if you have an injury, like I would absolutely love to help you with that as well.
And it was so amazing having you on the podcast. I feel like we have covered so many topics that are going to help so many women. So thank you so much for being vulnerable with us today and empowering your story. And I look forward to continuing to keep up with you in the future.
Yes. Thank you so much for having me on, Kate.
Thank you so much for tuning in and being vulnerable with me today. I'd love to hear from you, so make sure you come hang out with me on Instagram at KateAnnFit. Let me know what you thought of this episode or leave a review here. And don't forget, I want to cover topics that you want to hear about. Let me know what topics you want me to cover either in the comments or shoot me a message on Instagram, and I'll talk to you soon.